Our next unit now, we're going to focus on different types of business ownerships. And we're going to cover a few different ones, including, a startup in which you start your own business all by yourself, a partnership where you and at least one other person begin a business venture together, purchasing an existing business, which would be like if I walked down the street to Donutland and if they were for sale, I could make an offer and then I would assume ownership of that business. Or, like we're going to talk about today, purchasing a franchise. That's going to be our primary focus today. When we hear the term franchise, probably the first thing that comes to mind is a store that you see all over the state, all over a region, all over the country, or even all over the world. And the number one franchise that we have spent a lot of time looking at so far would be McDonald's. We spent a lot of time examining McDonald's, their menu, and developing a new product for McDonald's. Later on in this unit, we will actually look at what has made McDonald's such a successful franchise. I know we've covered that a little bit in the past Edpuzzle. And we will also get you guys online looking at what it takes to own a franchise. Essentially, all a franchise is it's an agreement between two entities. A franchisee, which would be me in this case. If I'm the one looking to purchase a franchise, I am the franchisee. And the franchisor, or the corporation that owns said franchise, right? McDonald's, Wendy's, whatever it might be. And it's an agreement with a lot of money being exchanged that I, as a franchisee, can own and operate a franchise. I get to use their brand, their menu, their likeness. They provide a lot of different things to me as well. But I get to be a McDonald's franchisee. Becoming a franchisee is not a cheap option. Quite often, depending on the industry you choose to get into, it is much more expensive than just starting up your own business. But it does come with a lot of perks as well. First, we're going to look at some of the costs associated with becoming a franchisee. Up front, if I were to become a franchisee of McDonald's, of Wendy's, of O'Reilly Auto Parts, of a Ford dealership, whatever the franchise opportunity is, I would have to pay a franchise fee. That's typically paid up front. It's either a one-time expenditure. Some franchises might have you pay that each year, but typically it's a one-time expense. And that is a fee I pay basically just to get my foot in the door. In order to become a franchisee, I have to pay a franchise fee. Because remember, I'm taking on that brand. And so they want, if their brand means something, they want to make sure that they're being compensated for the brand they provide. It's a way for them to make money up front, giving you the opportunity to become a franchisee. Some startup costs, and I've actually looked at this over the years in class, and I could share some things that I have found online. But if you were to go to a company website and look at some of their startup costs to become a franchisee, that might include real estate. You might be out of pocket for finding a location, and obviously that doesn't necessarily change. Even if you were starting your own business, you still have to have a location. It might be equipment that they require you to have. Years ago, and this was really dating this year because some of you probably don't even remember this, but if you were to look at the Fountains area off Edgewood Road, kind of by Highway 100, and there's a Hy-Vee there now. McDonald's has been there as long as I've been here, so 20 years. But there's a Poncheros over there. And so in class, before that Poncheros was even in existence there, I looked up what would one need to become a franchisee of Poncheros, and one of their requirements was, the equipment. So think of everything that goes in the kitchen and the costs associated with that. And then also the location had to be an end cap location in a strip mall. And that would be part of the startup costs. Is if I would have to find a location, and it would have to be the end location in a row of shops. It couldn't be in the middle of a strip mall. It'd have to be the end cap. And that's because it has the most window space and it has the most storefront available to passerbys. And sure enough, that's where that Poncheros went in. It's at the end cap of the strip mall. Royalty fees. If I own my own business, I get to keep my profits, right? I'm my own boss. If I become a franchisee, I have to pay a percentage of my profits back to the franchise corporation, franchisor. And those are usually going to be stated as a percentage of sales. And it could be weekly, could be monthly, could be quarterly, so every 3 months. But again, I'm using their products and their brand. And in order for them to be profitable, they are going to take a kickback at that. That comes by way of royalty fees, percentage of profits or earnings paid back to that parent corporation. Advertising. If I owned my own business, whatever it was, P Money's Burgers, let's say, I would have to come up with my own advertising, whether that's commercials, whether that's ads online, social media, whatever it might be. I'm out of pocket for all of those. If I become a McDonald's franchisee, I get the benefit of the millions and millions and millions of dollars they spend in advertising. And since I benefit from that, I do have to pay them advertising fees. So again, in order for them to be successful, they need me to be successful. And they also need money from me to pay for everything that goes into being such a successful corporation and franchise. And so it's not uncommon that I would have to pay advertising fees since I'm using what they're creating to support my business. So the operating costs are very high for a franchise. It is a much more expensive, obviously depending on the industry and the sector that you get into. But upfront, becoming a franchise owner typically is a much more expensive way to go when it comes to being a business owner. But again, you get the benefit of having an established brand that people already know about. So we talk about some of these advantages, and you see Texas Roadhouse right there, right? If I were to open up, Steve's Steak Shop, whatever it might be, you don't know anything about that. You don't know what the products are. You don't know what they do well. You don't know what they struggle with. You've never seen it outside of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, if that's where we were located. But with a franchise, if you're driving by the highway and you see a Texas Roadhouse, you know what that is before you even walk in. You know you're going to get some biscuits or some rolls with some cinnamon butter, right? Pre-COVID times, you're going to get some peanuts that you can eat while you're waiting and toss them on the floor. You know what's on their menu. You know their pricing model. You know what the inside of the building's probably going to look like. So you're provided with that established product or service. You, as the franchisee, know what you're getting, and your consumers that you're selling to, they know what they're going to get. The franchisor is going to offer assistance. Again, they only make money if you are successful. So they'll offer training. They might they might have you fly to their corporate headquarters or to a franchise that's in operation to study, to train, to ask questions, to follow, and see how they do business and what makes them successful. They might offer you software for your accounting, for your ordering. They'll establish links with suppliers that they use. So you don't have to do any of that yourself because it's established by the franchisor, by the franchise, who they get their products from. They have those contracts in place. They can get you likely better deals. What we know in business is if the more I buy of a product, typically the lower the cost is going to be. So if a if it comes to tables, if it comes to refrigerators, freezers, furniture inside of a location, parts, they have those contracts in place, and so you can get it for a less expensive rate than if it was just me going down the road trying to get it from a supply store. And then, of course, there is that guarantee of consistency. It can't be overstated how strong that is. That's what makes these franchises successful. You, as a franchisee, are given an established brand and an established product. Your customers are familiar with that established brand and that established product. There's no guesswork going on. They know what they're going to get. And so a big lure of becoming a franchise owner is that you have that established brand. You pay a lot for it, but it can also be very profitable. But we've talked about a lot of the advantages associated with becoming a franchisee. There are also definitely some disadvantages. In addition to the high costs that you pay up front, you are also limited quite a bit in your decision making. We've talked about royalty fees, franchise fees, things that you have to pay back to that corporation. So even if you are profitable, you don't get to keep all of that. You have to pay a portion of that back to the franchise corporation because, again, you are using their established brand and their product. You're basically given the playbook, but you have to pay for that playbook to be successful. So it can cut into your profits. You have less freedom to make decisions. If I started my own restaurant, I have absolute free reign over what products and services I want to provide to my customers. I have full control over my pricing mechanism. If I become a franchisee, I am definitely limited in that aspect. I have to follow the brand. I have to follow the guidelines of the franchisor and that corporation. If I opened up a McDonald's in Cedar Rapids, I cannot just walk in there and say, you know what? I make a pretty damn good spaghetti and meatballs at my home kitchen. I'm going to throw that up on the menu. Nope. Can't do it. That violates your franchise agreement. You have to stay in line with what they do. I am also dependent on the performance of other franchises in the chain. We have discussed the 4 Ps, and promotion is something that can definitely inversely affect franchisees. We now have a Quick Star right down the road from Kennedy. Right, it opened up a few months ago, I believe. Prior to that, there was a BP, British Petroleum, gas station there. Years ago, when you guys were pretty young, there was an oil spill in the Gulf off the coast of Louisiana. Lots and lots of damage to wildlife, to the Gulf, washed up on the shores. It was a bad deal. The company whose oil rig caused that was British Petroleum, BP. So imagine if you are a BP franchisee in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. You are a franchisee of a gas station on 42nd Street and Center Point Road in Cedar Rapids. And your parent franchise is responsible for an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. That negative publicity is impacting your business. You, as a franchisee, had nothing to do with it. But all folks hear on the news is BP oil spill, BP oil spill, British Petroleum killing wildlife. And that absolutely negatively affects your brand. There's been instances of Taco Bell products and what actually goes into what they classify as meat, and the percentage of beef that has to go into a product to be considered meat. There's actually an FDA guideline that states a percentage that has to be real meat, real beef, I should say, to be called meat. There was controversy about whether Taco Bell was meeting those requirements. If I owned a Taco Bell over on Blair's Ferry Road, I don't choose what goes into that, but I am feeling the brunt I'm taking some blame if my corporation, my franchisor, is maybe dishonest, or if my products or their products in another state are making people sick. I'm going to feel the brunt of that. And so I am dependent on the performance of other franchises and that parent corporation. If I own my own shop, I only answer to myself. The franchisor can also terminate any franchise agreement. If they deem that you are not profitable enough, they can end the contract. If they decide that you are not following the agreements, they can end that contract. If they have to cut stores, which is something we have seen happen a lot since March, just with everything that's gone on with COVID, that parent corporation is losing money, they are going to have to cut back, and you could be a casualty of that as a franchise owner. So while it can be extremely profitable, as we've seen in the McDonald's Edpuzzle, to become a franchisee, you are also at the mercy of somebody else. You are not necessarily your own boss if you become a franchise owner. We've hit on some basics of what a franchise is. Later on, we'll talk about starting your own business and some of the pros and cons associated with that. For our next activity, you are actually going to browse a few websites, and you are going to be looking at some of the costs associated with owning a franchise.